I'd never seen Kendo before. It was freaky, actually. It was violent. The shock, the excitement, the frustration. I didn't think that I would last a year, 35 years later. The way that I do Kendo is a representation of me. Kendo itself tests every part of you as a human. Your mental strength, your resilience. If you want to get good at Kendo, you've got to...
Hey there, and thank you for tuning in. We're excited to bring you another great conversation today. If you like the show and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you great content week after week. And if you're feeling extra generous, give this video a like and share your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into it. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Alex Bennett. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're a Kendo master and a teacher at Kansai University.
Yes, right. Yeah,
and you've done a lot of research into martial arts in Japan, and today we're going to dive deep into that field. Like with every guest, I want to know a little bit more about what brought you to Japan in the first place.
Well, we're going back quite a few years now. I've lived in Japan 35 years in total. The first time I came over was in 1987. And you can probably tell by my accent that I'm from New Zealand. 1987 was still what they call the bubble economy years. Japan was very wealthy. They called it the economic animal. And in the 80s, when I was going to school in New Zealand, the high school that I went to, in its day, it was a little bit different to other schools. Most schools, you'd have to learn a foreign language. It was usually French or German or Russian or something like that. But my school had Japanese, which was a rarity at that time. But I figured that if I studied Japanese, then Japan being the economic animal that it is, then maybe I'll land myself a good job and make myself lots of money in the future. That was what I was thinking when I was about 13 or 14. And so I started studying Japanese at high school and got to a certain level, and the teacher at school said, well, you know, if you really want to get good at Japanese, you've got to go to Japan. And so I got myself a Rotary scholarship to come to Japan for 1 year at a high school in Chiba. And my only objective was to learn Japanese. Because I figured I'd be ahead of the game. Japan was a country. I mean, we didn't have the internet back then, right? So the kind of information that we had about Japan was limited, and it was just very mysterious kind of country. Some ways it was a little bit frightening. It had a good rep and a bad rep at the same time because of its economic power and.
What was it like when you arrived at the time?
Well,
on your first journey to Japan?
I arrived sometime in January in 1987 at Narita Airport, and throughout the year I had 5 different homestays, and my first homestay came out to the airport to pick me up, and of course the study that I'd done at high school, learning the language, once I got to Japan, it didn't mean anything because I didn't understand a damn thing. And so I was sort of a little bit overwhelmed by the reality of being here. Just driving in the car from Narita Airport to the homestay house was like mind-blowing, because just like a different world compared to New Zealand. Like one thing, it seems a little bit silly now, but one thing that stuck in my mind is everybody's driving these brand new cars, because New Zealand was just full of, people drive junk.
Old cars that have been maintained for a while.
Yeah, for a long time, right? And so everybody's driving all these flash new cars, and the buildings were different, the smells were different. Obviously the language, you get to the house and everything about that is different. You're taking off your shoes, everything seems so clean. The food was just like some, the sort of thing I'd never had before. Everything was just shockingly new. at first it was very exciting. You feel quite sort of playful in a way, being in this new place. This, everything is just so new and vibrant. So the first few months I guess they call it the honeymoon, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
It was like getting used to life here and going to high school, making new friends or trying to make new friends, trying to obviously work out the language and communicate. But after a while, after a few months, the reality starts to sink in, and not like today when you've got a smartphone and you can contact your friends back home,
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime, whatever you want. But in those days, I had nothing. I couldn't even make an international phone call. It was either write letters or maybe, if I was lucky, send a fax. So after about 2 months of being here, I sort of started to feel quite cut off. And I wouldn't say alone, because people were helping me all the time, but trying to get on in life and move independently became, increasingly difficult, because like even the simple task of creating a bank account, New Zealand, it would have taken me 5 minutes. In Japan, it took me about 3 weeks. So that kind of thing, the longer you live here, if obviously you start to see, you start to become a part of that reality. You start to be a participant, and then you start to hit various hurdles. And so my first few months in Japan, I'll never forget them. It's quite a few years ago now, of course, but 40 years ago. But they still, just the shock, the excitement, and the frustration, and the playfulness, and everything all came together. And it's sort of like, I didn't think at that time that I would last a year. And 35 years later.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
Yeah.
what is it then that made you want to come back and stay here for 35 years later?
I don't know. There's a few things. It's not just one thing, but, I guess I could say honestly that the chance encounter I had with Kendo. So I'd always been a fairly avid sports player in New Zealand. My main sport was soccer, not rugby, which New Zealand is fairly well known for. But
Yeah.
I was a soccer player. I used to play tennis and cricket and various other sports as well. And so when I came over to Japan for the first time, you go to a high school, a lot of the kids are engaged in a club activity.
Mm-hmm.
They call them bukatsudo. And it was expected as an exchange student, and I was the only exchange student at my high school. So in those days, it was still, you walk around Japan and people would point at you and say gaijin, that sort of thing. We don't have that anymore, thank goodness. But in those days, it very much stood out in the crowd, and so it was an expectation as an exchange student to do what the other students are doing and muck in with them. And so I wanted to play soccer at the high school soccer club. And that was my intention, actually, until I saw the state of the soccer ground, which
Just
is
dirt.
It's just dirt with lots of rocks, and it's not exactly an ideal environment. And so I thought about it for a while, and things with Japanese clubs at high school, again, this is culture shock 101. Like compared to New Zealand, of course it's going to be different. But New Zealand, most kids, do a sport of some sort or belong to a club of some sort. But you belong to a number of clubs at the same time. So sports are, I don't know about now, but back in my day they were divided into winter sports and summer sports. And so soccer was what I played in the winter, and cricket is what I played in the summer, along with tennis and various other things, because you only go to your clubs maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But come to Japan, it's a 24/7 thing. And if you join the soccer club or the baseball club or whatever, the Kendo club in my case, you're pretty much training 7 days a week.
So every day after class,
Yeah.
you go to your club and you practice.
That's right. And we used to have school on Saturdays then. School would finish at 12. Then we'd have club from 1 o'clock right the way through to 6 o'clock.
Wow.
And then on Sunday, of course, there are no classes, but we would still have club from 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock. And it's like 7 days a week and throughout the whole year. So it's not divided into seasons, right? And so I wanted to play soccer, and I thought, well, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this. This is silly. And then there was still that expectation that I do something. So my host mother at the time, she said, well, since you're in Japan, why don't you do something Japanese, like a Japanese sport of some sort? Japanese sports are basically martial arts, right? And the two martial arts clubs that they had at my high school were judo and kendo. And of course, everyone knows about judo, but I'd never seen kendo before. And so I went along to the dojo to check it out, and it sort of blew my mind. It was freaky, actually. It was violent. It was loud. Had a peculiar aroma about it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, more than anything, it was kind of frightening because these kids were just going at it and screaming and yelling. And there was the main teacher, Sano Sensei. I didn't know who was who, of course, at the time. I just went along to watch, but there was this really big guy, and he was beating the snot out of some of these kids to the extent that it's like, there's no way that is legal. If that was New Zealand, I'm sure that person would be arrested.
Wow.
That was how bad it was. But it was kind of exhilarating at the same time. It's like, wow, this is like serious samurai stuff. It's, my first impressions. So I thought, oh, why not give it a go? If there had been karate, I would have done karate because karate was really big at the time. There was a movie called Karate Kid, which you might know about.
I do.
Indeed.
And it's still popular today.
Yeah,
and
it
they've
is.
made remakes, I think.
They have. Yeah, that's right. So that came out in the 80s, if I remember. And so karate was big.
What was his name? Mr. Miyazaki?
Mr.
Right?
Mr. Miyagi.
Miyagi.
Yeah, with Daniel-san. And so I would have done karate for sure, but we didn't have a karate club in my school, which is kind of typical because many people might be surprised to know that karate there's a lot of it now because it was an Olympic sport in the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, and that sort of made it more popular. But generally speaking, compared to judo or compared to kendo, the numbers are really small. So it's kind of a minor budo in Japan. It certainly was in the time when I was at high school. So there was no karate, but there were kendo and judo. And so after watching kendo, I thought, oh, why not give it a go? I'll try it and see if I like it.
So they put you into that armor. They gave you the stick. And then the teacher...
They didn't put me into the armor. They gave me the stick, which is called a shinai. It's the bamboo replica sword, if you can call it that, practice sword. And I was just taught basic movements, starting off with something called suburi, which is practice swings. So you hold the sword in what they call the kamae, your stance, and you practice striking, moving and striking at the same time, backwards and forwards, hundreds, thousands of times, so that your body and the sword sort of start melding together and it becomes part of you and you get used to moving with the shinai. And so that's all I did every day, thousands upon thousands of these practice swings. Some bare feet, so backwards and forwards on this wooden floor. And after day one, I was already aching in places I didn't even know I had muscles, and my hands and my feet were covered in blisters, and it's like, this is just awful. I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing here. Like if it was judo or karate, like judo is, if you throw somebody, you know you're doing the technique right, or you know it's got some kind of practical value, right? Or karate, you're learning how to kick and punch and stuff like that. But kendo doesn't have any of that.
How was it explained to you when you got there and maybe the teacher or another student was like, okay, this is kendo, this is what it is?
I'm sure it was explained to me, but I have no idea what anybody was saying at the time. And so it was more like showing me what to do and giving me a whack on the backside if I was doing it wrong, or if I stopped to go and get a drink of water, whack on the backside.
Also not allowed anymore.
No, none of that sort of thing. And so it was just, what I was doing was practice swings. Everybody else around me was going crazy with their armor on and screaming and yelling and attacking each other. And Sano Sensei was beating everybody up. And I was watching this as I was doing it, thinking, well, this is not for me. So after a few days, I went to Sano Sensei and I said, sorry, I think Kendo's not really for me. So I'd like to leave. Thank you very much. And he goes, well, you can't. And it's like, well, I thought that was my decision. No. You have to do this for a year now. It's like Hotel California, right? Once you've checked in.
Can't check out.
They're not going to let you out. And it's like, so I was trying to get to grips with everything. You know, my daily commute to school, you know, learning how to ride the bus and the train and sitting in these classes with the other students every day, not knowing what's going on. And so everything is just all starting to sort of pile up. And it's like the last thing I wanted to be doing was standing in this dojo, this cold, I should say, because it was winter when I started. This cold dojo doing all these really boring exercises, not understanding what the hell I'm doing it for. But it was like, nope, you're going to have to do it. So sit down, shut the hell up, and learn kendo for the next year. That's your challenge. And it's like, God damn.
What have I signed up for?
Yeah, what have I signed up? It was exactly like that. But what I found after a while is the members of the Kendo club, they started looking after me because they could see that I was extremely distressed and confused by this whole thing, and they started looking after me. They became good friends, and so I started going to Kendo not because of the Kendo, but because of the people. And so when like the commute or biking home or whatever, depending on the homestay, my dress was different, and so they would always help me out, and they sort of became my minders in Japan. And it's because of them that I stuck at it. And after about 6 months of this, every single day, hating it, something kind of weird happened. I'm not quite sure how I can explain it, but something that got me hooked on Kendo. Actually, I started to get it finally. And what happened was every day at practice, one of the students would, for lack of a better way of explaining it, become a sacrificial lamb for everybody else.
So the teacher can demonstrate on him.
Yeah. And it was pretty gruesome. It was, it was violent. It was hard. These kids, when they go up against the teacher, he would just go, right, now I'm going to tear strips off you and I'm going to just beat you to a pulp and take you to hell and back. And every day somebody else got the treatment. Nobody knew who was going to get it and when. It's just you go and line up against the teacher and it might be over in a minute or it might be over, in 30 minutes or 40 minutes. It just depends. It was brutal, but I never got that treatment because there's no way that, being a foreigner in Japan that would be acceptable. And so I always got off really easy. But one day I was walking to the dojo after class, and just outside the school there was some campaign girls. I don't know what they were campaigning for, but they were giving away free packets of potato chips. And so I went and They're quite cute too, if I remember correctly. I went and grabbed a bag of potato chips thinking, oh, well, this is good. I can eat this before I go to training. And I was walking down the school corridor to go to the dojo, eating my potato chips. And suddenly somebody came up and belted me in the head, out of nowhere for no reason. So what the hell? And it was one of the physical education teachers.
Just punched you right
Just
like
punched
that
me
in the corridor.
in the corridor. Just not open hand, it was a punch. Bang! And of course I was stunned. And I thought, what the hell has just happened? And you can imagine I was livid. Teachers don't punch students. They did back then. Not anymore, of course, but in those days they did. And I didn't even know why. And this was a culmination of months of hardship, trying to get to terms, which was about 6 months in. I was getting frustrated already that my language wasn't perfect, and I still didn't understand what people were saying. Turn on the television, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. You start making up stories in your head, trying to interpret, the dramas or the news or whatever. I was getting frustrated with that. And I guess the biggest thing for me, which was building up to this incident, was the heat in Japan.
Summer heat.
The summer heat. I'd never experienced anything like it ever in New Zealand. And I had no idea that it was going to get so hot in Japan and humid. And so it was like a total shock to the system. And I was really, at this point, getting quite homesick. And I was really hating Japan. I was hating it.
The Kendo practice, the heat,
everything.
The not understanding.
It was all just too much.
And then the punch.
And it's like, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure.
Fuck this. And I was at breaking point, and it's like, nah, I want out. Because I don't know, when you're an exchange student, when you're young, that young, I was only 17, right? 1 year is a long time.
Yes, it is. And
the first 6 months seemed to take forever. And I was thinking, another 6 months, I'm not going to last. Now, as you're in your 50s, 1 year's like that, right? It's like goes nowhere. But so anyway, I went to the dojo, and I was just so angry, and I didn't understand what had happened.
So the teacher just punched you and left, and you continued and went to the dojo.
Yep.
And then you greet Sano Sensei, and you probably have a big mark on your face.
Something like that. And because Sano Sensei was also a PE teacher, obviously this guy, oh God, I wish I could see him today, but anyway, he must have told Sano Sensei that, I just disciplined Alex, walking down the corridor, eating potato chips. And so Sano Sensei knew that I would have been quite upset about this, because I had no explanation, nothing. It was just bang, thank you, off you go. And so Sano Sensei came up to me and said, oh, look, I hear you got disciplined on the way to the dojo. Well, the thing is, in Japan, it's really rude to eat while you walk, which is why blah blah sensei took it upon himself to discipline you, just to teach you a lesson. Which, of course, as far as I'm concerned, is not a reason at all. So I was just so angry. And so I went, as we did, started training, and I was just in a different realm at that point. I was so angry. And then I went up against Sano Sensei, and I thought, you know what?
I'm going to let it out on you.
I'm going to let it out on you, you bastard. So I just went nuts. I absolutely went nuts. And by this stage, I'd learned, the basic techniques. I sort of knew what I was doing, and I just went crazy. And he liked it. He goes, oh, here we go. Found yourself in Kendo, have we? Good. And so I just smashed into him, and I was just going crazy. And after about a minute of my hysterical attack on Sano Sensei, of course, I started getting a little bit exhausted, because you're screaming and yelling and throwing your whole body and soul into every single attack while you're doing it. And, it's like if you can imagine doing a 100-meter sprint, and while you're doing it, you're screaming at the same time. Okay, by the time you get to the 100 meters, the finish line, you're going to be pretty puffed out, right? Mm-hmm. Well, imagine if that continued for another 100 meters, and then another 100 meters, and another 100 meters. You never know when it's going to go, but you've got to give your all in that 100 meters and for however long it goes. Well, this is what this kind of training was like. It's called attack practice. And so I lasted for about a minute, and then Sano Sensei decided, well, now it's my turn. And so he started attacking me, coming at me. I mean, he was a big guy, and I was only really, really little back then. And I still remember it really clearly. I see Sano Sensei like a tsunami just coming at me like this, coming at me. And I thought, this split second, it's like, okay, I can take it front on, deal with it, and I'd get knocked probably, meters back. There's a wall behind me. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, well, all right, I can do the right thing and take it front on and get squashed, or I can do the cowardly thing and just move out the way while he's coming at me, and I did the cowardly thing. Sano Sensei went smashing into the wall, and he did leave a fist mark in the wall, a hole, and then he got really angry with me because I did the un-Kendo thing. Like in Kendo or any Budo martial arts, the idea is like when you're confronted with somebody, if you don't run away, you take it front on. You deal with it one way or the other. That's the kind of spirit they try and cultivate in you with your training, where you're always going forward. And so then my hell began. And so the idea is I've got to keep attacking. You can't stop. You just got to keep going until it comes to a natural end. So I kept attacking and then collapsing. And as soon as I collapse, he jumps on top of me and goes, "Give up, ka! Give up, ka!" Some kind of hybrid Japanese English. It's like, no! And then from somewhere, it's just bizarre. Somehow, somewhere, your body just re-energizes, and you jump up and you bang, get back into it,
and then you get back down,
and then down. And it's up and down the whole time, and yeah, I still have this really vivid memory of it. But after a while, I started thinking, I don't care anymore. It actually feels kind of good. I feel like you're floating. And it's like you're in a different sort of, different universe almost. And until that point, everything was quite frightening. And then suddenly it's not frightening anymore. So it's just a complete change in your mind. And then your body just reacts and does what it needs to do. Meanwhile, I remember being very calm, but I was letting my body do all the hard work. And I remember, and I don't know if this is healthy or not, but I do remember thinking, oh, gee, this must be what it's like when you die or something. And I remember having that thought. And it continues and continues. Anyway, finally it finishes. It finishes with me making one last gasp attack on Sano Sensei's mask or head with the sword. And then he grabs me and gives me a cuddle and says, "Oh, that's enough for you today." And I looked at the time when I'd finished, because I was just completely spent. I looked at the clock, which is up on the dojo wall, and I'd been doing this for 40 to 50 minutes, because I remember I started at exactly 5 o'clock, and it was about 5:45 or 5:50, and it's like, what just happened? And that was in this incredible heat. And I think I probably did die in a way. But what happened after that is like, it was a massive change in me, because, and I'm not a masochist. Well, I suppose I am in a way. Like all Kendo people are masochists and sadists and all mixed in together. But it's like without wanting to sound too sort of weird about it, it sort of changed my outlook. Just that one experience changed my outlook on things. And it's like suddenly nothing's really frightening. If I can do this and survive, then shit, I can do anything. And so I went away from that feeling incredibly relieved, but also incredibly confident. And the experience of the hell before it starts, because you're nervous, you're really nervous and scared, and then the euphoria when it's finished, it's like, that's quite addictive, right? And so every day after that, I wanted to have that feeling again. I'd go straight up to Sano Sensei and go straight in again, and he would, sometimes he'd be a little bit stricter, sometimes he wouldn't be, because he's judging you on the feeling that you're coming at him with, and if he's satisfied with, with your intent, with your focus, with your dedication, with your spirit, then okay, that's enough. Or otherwise, he'll give you a kick up the backside, which will go a lot longer.
So that's a day that Kendo kind of clicked for you.
If
you had to explain
yeah.
today to someone what is Kendo, what would you say?
Well, I wouldn't tell them that, because it's kind of special. And to be perfectly honest, if that sort of thing happened now, it would be a problem. So Japan has changed a lot in those decades since then. That kind of treatment is no longer acceptable in Japan. But if somebody was to ask me what is Kendo now, well, Kendo has many different levels and many different faces. But ultimately, what Kendo is for me, it's a lifelong philosophy. So it's very physical, of course, but the decades that I've been doing it, it's obviously the physical side is obviously very important, but it becomes, it sort of changes as your physicality, as your body changes as well, and your life experience accumulates, the way you think about things, your values. My Kendo, the way that I do Kendo is a representation of me. And Kendo itself is a way in which when I'm doing Kendo with other people, I'm communicating with them through Kendo. It's a medium for exchange, a medium of communication. It's a vehicle for finding out things about yourself, about your various strengths and weaknesses, because inevitably the strengths and weaknesses you have as a person will manifest in your Kendo. And if you want to get good at Kendo, you've got to fix these problems, and by extension that you're actually trying to work on yourself at the same time as a person. So it's a lifelong philosophy that basically tests every part of you as a human. Your body, obviously, your mental strength, your resilience, your ability to learn from your mistakes, your ability to learn of other people, and it's something that doesn't end. So I will practice on a typical practice. I will fight somebody who maybe is at high school, who's just starting out, or junior high school. So people in their teens, to university students in their early 20s, to people in the workforce, obviously men and women in their 30s, 40s, people the same age as me in my 50s, and then people way beyond me in years. Like a couple of years ago, I fought somebody who was 102 years old.
Wow. Still practicing.
Still practicing. And he kicked my ass. He really did. I'm not just saying that, So it's just constant. And so you're always learning off all these people around you who are all at different stages in their journey, if we can call it a journey. And I think it is exactly that, a journey of self-discovery. So that's pretty much what I'd call it, I guess, a journey of self-discovery.
So Kendo, the way of the sword.
Mm.
Originally, I think like most people will associate this with is like, oh, it's a samurai used the swords, and it's kind of how it was born.
Yeah.
Is that the true story of where this martial art comes from?
Yes, it does. It certainly does come from that. So it's one of the vestiges of samurai culture for sure. But having said that, what we do in the dojo today it's not the way a samurai would have used a sword. So it's changed, obviously, because of the environment and the traditionally. It never used to be called Kendo. It used to have lots of other words, but the most well-known word would be Kenjutsu. And what we do today in Kendo really has its origins in the early 18th century. Obviously, swordsmanship goes back way beyond that, much earlier than that. But the development of safe training equipment like the gauntlets, the kote we call it, and body protector, the door, the bamboo sword, which we call is called the shinai. That the development and introduction of that kind of equipment was in the early 18th century, and it's from there that various different schools of kenjutsu would utilize this equipment, but they'd be doing a different kind of thing. So all of these different schools of swordsmanship, sort of what they were doing sort of came together into one, say, homogenized / standardized form of training in the early 20th century.
That's quite recent, actually.
It is. And so then it was from this time that it became obviously an important part of the school education system. It was introduced into schools as physical education, which is why it needed to be standardized so that people throughout, kids throughout the whole of Japan were doing the same thing.
Which is kind of how you got introduced to it as well, right?
Very much so.
1,000 repetitions of...
that sort of thing, right? So there's so many different things I could talk about here, but I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. Japan in 1868, 1869, 1870s onwards changed considerably from its feudal sort of shogunate running the country to a modern nation state with the emperor as its head. And so what kicked this off was the Meiji Restoration. And then after the Meiji Restoration, 1868, 1869 onwards, Japan sort of embarked on this mission to modernize as quickly as possible. And the way that they, modernized was to look at the West. Okay, what has the West got that we can use? And
not swords.
Yeah, not swords. Swords were, not very good in modern theater of war, where they have whopping great big cannons and guns and various things.
Mm-hmm.
And so Japan sort of introduced or adopted various systems from the West. For example, the military system, the education system, the legal system, and so on and so forth. And if you've ever seen the movie The Last Samurai,
yes,
it's exactly at that time that we're talking about. And Tom Cruise type characters came over and sort of helped Japan sort of as it adopted and developed these various systems, whatever they might be. And in education, they introduced calisthenics and physical education for all of the Japanese kids. Taiso, yep. And they're all to go to school now and undergo a standardized, education in the system that is created for everybody. And so physical education was considered very important, as it was in the West in those days. But there were people in government and educators are saying, well, yeah, sure, the whole idea of physical education or this, whole Western education system is fine, but what can we do to give it more Japanese essence? For example, with physical education, we have our own traditional physical culture. That is the martial arts. It used to be the domain of the samurai, not entirely, not only the samurai, but mainly the samurai were practicing things like kenjutsu and these various other martial arts, jujutsu and whatnot. But why can't Japan sort of take our traditional physical culture and adapt it to make it useful for Japanese citizens as Japan becomes a modern nation state? And it took a while. It took a lot of lobbying from various, people in government and martial artists who had pretty much lost their jobs at the time because there was no need for traditional martial arts anymore. But eventually, the traditional martial arts were adapted, systemized, and I guess you could say homogenized to be able to be practiced by children with one teacher teaching large groups like you do in school instead of the one-on-one as the traditional way of doing it. And also, more importantly, safety. And so you practice, if it's judo or whatever, you can practice these techniques without getting injured or without injuring somebody else, and people from, various builds or experience can practice together. So the martial arts were reconstructed. They almost became obsolete, but they were reconstructed mainly for the education system. There were also in the armed forces and the police, they also adopted the martial arts as part of their training to keep physically fit. So in the modern era, the martial arts took on a completely different sort of meaning in many ways in terms of their usage. And it's from there that the Kendo that we do today really had its biggest overhaul. So what we are doing absolutely has its roots in samurai culture, in early modern medieval culture, but it has evolved and changed to stay relevant over the centuries. So what we're doing is nowhere near exactly the same, but there's a lot of overlap. The techniques are obviously different. It's very sportified now, but the theory and the principles behind the techniques that we practice every day still use the same terminology and the same concepts that you'll find in books written about martial arts in the 1600s and the 1700s and so on. For example, Miyamoto Musashi, who's one of Japan's probably most famous swordsmen, he wrote a book called Gorin no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings. Or Yagyu Munenori wrote a book in 1632 called Heiho Kadensho, and it goes it talks a lot about the various principles, philosophies, psychology behind the physical techniques, and we still quote these books even today as we practice our martial arts. So the philosophy, the conceptual side of it is still very much rooted in the samurai age, but the way in which we do it obviously has changed to suit the modern era.
So it used to be pure fighting techniques by the samurai, turned into kind of physical education to preserve the culture, but based on the same principles. So if we take an example of, you started your Kendo practice with just moving back and forwards, throwing the stick in front of you, and doing it 1,000 times. I think this is probably a popular image people can see when they look up Kendo practice online, and they will see thousands of videos of people doing that.
Yeah.
What is the idea behind just doing this for thousands and thousands and thousands of times?
Well, let me refer back to that classic movie, Karate Kid. Now, there's a scene in there where Daniel-san has been instructed by Mr. Miyagi to, I think it was to clean his cars. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And the famous words, wax on, wax off.
Wax off, wax off.
Daniel's-san was thinking, why the hell am I doing this? He's just using me to clean his car or his cars. And so he didn't understand why he had to do this over and over and over and over again, this kind of movement. And then once he had had enough, because it's so boring and seems to have absolutely no practical application whatsoever, Mr. Miyagi challenged Daniel-san and punched him. He was able to block it without even thinking about it by doing the wax on, wax off sort of thing. So that's what we're doing basically, in that you memorize the movements with your body. There's a word for it in Japanese, taitoku, to acquire these techniques with your body. So you don't actually have to think about it anymore. It just happens. You just react in this particular way in this particular circumstance. Because if you think, it's too late. So you have to be able to respond, and so this kind of rote memorization with your body is an important part of all of the martial arts. It is tedious, it is hard, especially for beginners. You're thinking, why the hell do I have to do this? But after a while, you start to see the sense in it, because especially for something like Kendo in particular, you're using a sword, the shinai, and you're holding it out in front of your body like this, and it's incredibly unnatural. It feels unnatural. Just to maintain your sense of balance and to be able to move freely, and not, if you feel awkward, then that's going to screw with your mind, and if your mind is screwed with, then your body's not going to be able to move freely, and vice versa, and it works against each other, and then suddenly you get hit. You've got to break away from that. And so by practicing the movements over and over and over again, they become a part of you. The shinai itself becomes a part of you. It doesn't feel like an extension or an unnatural extension. It's sort of everything is sort of becomes a whole. So that kind of it's a very traditional way of training. Probably, in this modern day and age with various sort of teaching techniques and ways of learning, it could be changed or it could be done in another way. But the traditional way is to train your body to be able to move without having to think about it.
You said that it goes incredibly fast, and that's one of the reasons you have to basically learn to react instinctively. If we go to the sportification of Kendo and today, like international competitions and so on, I tried to look at a few videos. It's hard to tell what's happening, right? Because they both move very fast, and I never know who scored a point and what. Can you explain a little bit what does a Kendo competition entice today? What are the general rules, and how does it work?
Yeah. So in Kendo, both people face off with their shinai, and they are competing with each other to score a valid point on the other person within a set amount of time. The usual match time is 5 minutes, but depending on the situation, it can go on and on and on, even up to 30 minutes or even an hour sometimes. But the first person, to keep it simple, the first person to get 2 valid points is the winner. Okay, so, or if the time's up and one person's got 1 valid point, then that person's the winner. Or sometimes it can be a draw. But the idea is to get 2 valid points. Now the targets in Kendo are the head, which is we call men, the wrist, which we call kote, the body, torso, which we call do, and the throat, which is called tsuki. Now, in order to get a valid point, there are certain criteria that need to be met. And I'll just go through them one by one. You have to strike the target. Let's just say man. Let's say head, just to keep it simple. You have to strike the head accurately. Okay, so it can't be off to the side. Okay.
It has to be like head or like
straight
in the middle.
On the head, or if it's the kote, it has to be on this part of the wrist. It can't be up here. It can't be on the fist. It's got to be on this part. Or if it's the door, it can't be under the armpit because that hurts like hell. It's got to be actually on the plastron and exactly on the throat. So you've got to strike accurately with the correct part of the shinai. Now, the shinai is a long implement. It's supposed to represent a sword. You have the handle down the bottom with the sword guard. You want to strike the target with an area about 1/4 of the way from the top, just to keep it simple. So that means if you strike the target with closer to the hands, it's not good. Or if you strike it just with the tip touching the target, it's not good. It's got to be with the sweet spot of the shinai. Now you have to strike that target with the shinai and your body and your feeling, your spirit, all as one consolidated thing. So that means you've got to have good spirit as you make the strike, and your body and your sword and your spirit have to come together as one. And they call that ki ken tai ichi. So that means if I strike you, Toby, if I hit you, and then I go, man, but my legs are still behind me like this and my posture's kind of unbalanced, and this is not ki ken tai ichi. I have to strike you like with my feeling and my sword and my body all as one, like that, okay? And so sometimes you can hit the target, but you don't have the feeling or you don't have the right posture. And so even if you touch the target, it doesn't count. You've got to cut the target with everything coming together. And then after you've struck the target, you have to demonstrate that you are still in control and you are still alert and you're ready to counter any attack that your opponent might come at you afterwards. That's called zanshin. Okay, so you, even after I make the attack, say I cut your man, you're gonna come again, I'm still ready. And then the shimpan, the referees, they see that, well, you had all of the criteria met there. You struck with the correct part of the shinai, accurately on the target, with good, strong spirit, also with the blade facing the right way. Okay, so if you hit like that, that's just slapping, isn't it? If you think of a sword, you've got to actually cut in a way that's going to, if it was, in principle, if it was in theory, if it was a real fight, actually cutting. And after making that completely controlled, very accurate, very spirited attack, showing the vigilance afterwards, then the referees will put their flag up and say, yep, okay, that was good.
But all of this happens in like 1 second.
Just like that. And it's not just random stuff. And probably if you looked on television, you'll see stuff like the shinai is hitting the target, but the referees don't put their flags up. And you think, well, why not? It looked like it hit the target. Think of it like baseball or softball. If you hit the ball, if you hit it properly with the right posture, you don't even need much power, right? If you hit it properly with the sweet spot of the baseball bat, the ball's just going, whoosh, it's going to go off into the crowd for a home run. And that's the perfect hit, right? A less than perfect hit, you'll see that the ball will fly off in other directions, okay? So the fly ball or something like that, and it won't count. So for Kendo, you basically, when you make the strike on each one of the targets, it's got to be just like that home run strike, so that anybody who's watching is going, whoa, it had all of the components there that are necessary. And the thing is, it's not just a random thing, people just standing there just trying to hit. It's like there's a lot of stuff going on before that even happens. Like, for example, we're sitting here in front of each other. So this is the first time we've met. You think it's good? So what I just made you put your hand out, right? Okay. Out of nowhere. I mean, I should shake your hand that I made you do that. But the point is, it's like we're standing here like that, and I made you do something. So I was in control there, wasn't I? I put my hand out, so you responded. And so what we're doing in Kendo is like we're standing at this distance apart with swords, and we're communicating actually. And we're looking at, okay, what sort of person Toby is. Like, is he tense? Is he relaxed? Okay, what sort of presence you have. In response to that, how best should I sort of penetrate your kendo, to penetrate your defenses, to find an opening. One way I can do that is I can put a lot of pressure on you. I don't know if you felt anything like that, but sometimes when you've got somebody coming at you like that, you tense up
or you take a step back.
Yeah, you take a step back, in which case, okay, I'm controlling the engagement. Or I could do the opposite, and I could just relax like that, and you think, oh, here's an opening, and you're going to take advantage of that, and as you're taking advantage of it, I move out the way and counter-strike you. So you're controlling the timing, you're controlling the initiative. So it's not just random hitting, you're not reacting, you are creating. You're creating an opportunity. The opportunities can come if you can identify the gaps or the holes, not only physical, but also mental. And so like Toby is afraid, Toby is pissed off, Toby is tense, Toby is whatever. All of these things I can just by touching the sword, I can glean that information and I can use that to create a narrative in my favor. But if only it was so easy, because your opponent's doing exactly the same thing.
And you can't really see each other because you're wearing them, man. You're wearing the bit helmet.
All you can see are the eyes.
Oh, you can't see the eyes.
You can see the eyes.
Okay.
And so Kendo, we're always looking at each other's eyes. And we're also, if I could get you to extend your hand like that, we're also just by, with our shinais, with the touch of our shinais, we can feel,
if there's tension.
If there's tension, if there's, lucidness there, if there's confidence, if there's lack of confidence, if this person is fast, what kind of timing this person has. We're looking at the cadence. We're looking at all these things. We're using our eyes, and we're using our touch, and we're using our feeling, our instincts. All of these things are coming together in this kind of silent communication through the shinai tips.
It feels like the fight is more about the kind of emotional reading and communication with the partner, and the actual action of using the sword is instinctive from these thousands and thousands of practice, because that's the part you don't want to have to think about. You have to read your opponent, feel the situation, and based on that feeling, instinctively kind of act or react.
That's the best way of looking at it. That's pretty much what it is, actually. And to get to that point takes an awful long time. Many years of, rigorous, repetitive practice, so that it completely becomes second nature, like we are talking to each other at the moment. It's a similar sort of thing.
Talking about the years of practice, you're currently Kyoshi 7 Dan, which is one of the highest ranks in Kendo. And I was reading up about this, and this Dan system is maybe a little bit different than the one from Judo or other martial arts, because it's not only about what you can do and how good you are, but you need to have demonstrated a certain number of years of practice before you're even allowed to take the next exam.
So every Budo, Budo is the collective word for the Japanese martial arts, is different in their systems. Most of them have the Dan ranks, which most people around the world would identify as a black belt. Actually, Kendo, we don't have belts, but we have the Dan ranks, and it starts at the first Dan, which is Shodan, then Nidan, which is second Dan, or second degree black belt, okay, Sandan, all the way up to Hachidan, eighth Dan, which is the highest rank in Kendo. We also have other titles that are attached to that, but I won't worry about those. Just the actual Dan grades themselves are based on your technical ability. And after you've passed one examination, you have to wait a number of years or a certain amount of time before you can sit the next promotion examination. So for Shodan, for first degree black belt, most junior high school kids can pass the black belt.
I think the minimum age was 13 or 14.
That's right, yeah. And then after passing Shodan, you have to wait 1 year, and then you can sit the Nidan examination. And then after Nidan, you have to wait 2 years before you can sit the third Dan examination. Then from third Dan to fourth Dan, it's 3 years.
So if you add that up and you start the first one at 13, you can only get 8 Dan at like 46.
That's right. So the youngest, if you just say you pass every single examination that you sit, which, you know, some people do, but it takes some incredible skill to do that. The youngest possible age that you can sit the 8th Dan examination, the highest one, is at 46. So after passing 7th Dan, you have to wait 10 years before you can sit the 8th Dan examination. And the reason for that is, okay, you might be technically very skilled. Let's just say you pass the 7th Dan examination at the youngest age of 36. You know, people can do that if they're really, really amazingly skilled. But the reason for waiting 10 years before you are allowed to sit the examination for 8th Dan is because it's not only about skill, it's also about, you know, your attitude to training, your understanding not only of the technical or the physical side of things, but also very much about the conceptual side, the philosophy, also the spiritual side, the interaction between you and the other person, which takes a degree of maturity. Maturity not only in your kendo, but also in yourself as a person, as a human being. And so once we get up to the 8th Dan examination, I currently am challenging for the 8th Dan examination. And it's each exam, the pass rate fluctuates a little bit, but average of 0.5% pass rate.
That's very low.
It's extremely low, right? So if you pass the 8th Dan exam, you're kind of like, we're not worthy type thing. But everybody, you know, obviously wants to keep challenging for that. And I've challenged, how many times? 6 times now, not even close. And so I work with various different senseis who give me lots of different advice. And every day I'll go to a different place and I'll challenge somebody. And somebody will watch and they'll give me feedback and they'll say that, you know, you're too stiff or you're too tense or you're not using your feet well enough or you're striking your opponent but you're not cutting your opponent. Sometimes the advice gets really arcane, esoteric almost, but it's all this different advice that you're getting from your techniques to your approach to
Is
your
it even
presence.
possible to reach mastery of Kendo?
The people who we would call masters would say no. So it's even if you pass the 8th Dan, and many of my friends, colleagues have passed it, and you ask them what's changed, they will say nothing. There's just so much more to go, so much more to learn. So it's kind of, I sort of see it as, you know, and I don't know if I'm qualified to even say this, but a kind of an enlightenment. Once you're an enlightened being, that doesn't mean to say you're enlightened all the time. Everybody has these epiphanies. Everybody has these moments when you are clear and perhaps enlightened. But same sort of thing in Kendo. You get to the level of Hachidan, which, you know, we all look at as, you know, in awe. But, you know, any day and every day is different. And you've reached a certain level, okay, but to be able to maintain that, well, that's kind of pointless. You've got to keep striving to go higher and find, you know, a different peak to climb. And so is there mastery? That depends on your concept of what a master is, I suppose. But in terms of Kendo, we look at it as a way, just because you've passed Hachidan, phew, I can retire now. No. That's actually, you know, it's just another step that you've taken.
Like the person you challenged a couple of years ago who was 102, right? Still practicing, still.
Yep, exactly.
I don't know what the state of the federation is like today, but looking at the pass to kind of get to 6th or 7th dan even. At my age, if I were to start, it's basically mathematically nearly impossible for me to get there unless I live very long and I stay in very good shape and can practice Kendo that many years. Doesn't that deter people from starting? Because if they don't start at a very young age, it seems like it's not the kind of sport you'd get into if you're already like in your 30s or 40s.
That's kind of a misconception, I think. I think with most martial arts, people have this image, you've got to be kind of athletic, macho, masculine, all these sort of, preconceived ideas or notions about what Budo is, but absolutely not at all. I mean, if your goal is like, by hook or by crook, I want to pass the 8th dan examination, then probably that's very difficult if you start in your 40s. But that is not a goal.
Missing the point.
It's missing the point.
Doing Kendo.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I've done it for so long, that's the natural progression for where I'm at in my study so far. But every dan rank provides its challenges. If you were to start Kendo in your 30s or 40s, I know people who start in their 40s who've got up to the 7th dan and even trying for 8th dan. It's it's not impossible, but that's not the point. It's the journey along the way, the things that you learn along the way that you can take in and you can use outside the dojo as well. So to start Kendo with the intention of passing Hachidan, the 8th dan, I've never even heard of anybody doing that. The dan examinations, they hold a little bit of cachet, and especially, black belts, like, it's kind of a mystical thing. It's not at all. But what the dan ranks provide you is a milestone along your journey of things that, okay, you have tackled, learned to deal with, and taken that up another level. So it's always given you something to work for, and it's always keeping you humble as well. So with my challenge for Hachidan, I've failed it so far, as most people do, but what I have learned through each failure, through each attempt, through each resetting, if you like, of the things that I need to work on, and the things that I need to learn, the different approach that I need to take, the extra effort that I need to make. It's kept me honest. It's kept me humble. It's kept me determined. It's kept me very motivated. And so that, for me, is the point of Hachin. If I'd passed it first time, I wish I did. It would be nice, but I think that I didn't pass because I'm not ready, because I need to learn so much more. And so this whole process of learning and sometimes it's really hard to keep motivated. Sometimes it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning and go to training. But you've got this exam. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it the best of your ability. So it really it's those challenges that you find along the way, whether it be Shodan, whether it be Nidan, whether it be Hachidan, or whether it be no dan. Because I know a lot of people who do Kendo don't even care about that. They don't even sit the examinations. So everybody's different. But one of age is a great equalizer for people as well. So even, you get these people who start when they're kids and they, get up to their 50s, and you get somebody who started in their 40s and they're in their 50s. There's obviously going to be some difference, but the maturity that's already brought into the study by somebody who starts later in life is a really important aspect of it. And of course, you can't move like somebody who started as they're a kid, but that doesn't mean to say that what you're doing is not really high level, good quality Kendo. Everybody's different. Just like everybody has different physique, tall people, short people, men, women, children, elderly people, everybody can do Kendo together. And one of the wonderful things about Japanese Budo is I can go into a dojo and let's just say Kendo. And in that dojo, there might be 4 generations from one family doing practice together.
Wow.
You know,
That's pretty unique.
it's pretty unique, you know, and it's like, you know, whether, you know, granddad's got his 7th dan or his 8th dan, and, you know, the kids, you know, grandchild's got their shodan and the wife's got whatever dan. Doesn't matter. It's just getting in there and having that that exchange, that experience, that each bout that you have, each session that you have is kind of it gives you lots of things to think about. It's one of those unrepeatable, unprecedented moments. The word, I don't know if you've heard of Japanese, ichigo ichie, which is quite well known, right? And it's very much like every encounter that we have in Kendo is ichigo ichie. You know, like I think it's a T word, isn't it? But
yeah, like once in a lifetime.
Once in a lifetime, and it's the approach that you have. So, you know, passing examinations is just a very small part of Kendo. Winning competitions, you know, regional, national, world championships, that's, you know, it's all part of the Kendo sphere, but it's not the ultimate objective. It's part, you know, it can be an ultimate objective at one part of your study.
But it goes back to being a way of life, as you described it.
Eventually
earlier.
it will, yeah.
One of the ways you kind of furthered your studies of Kendo is also academically. And you've pursued 2 PhDs, and now you're teaching also at Kansai University.
Yeah.
And you've released a lot of publications. Can you tell me a little bit about your interest in, like, what are you really researching, and what are you trying to kind of figure out in the academic side of things?
I sort of fell into academia. It was never an objective of mine to stay on and you know, get PhD and so on. But I was genuinely interested in studying more about the history and the philosophy of Budo at quite a young age. When I was about 20, I have to go back a little bit, I suppose. Let me just backtrack a little bit. When I finished my exchange in Japan, I went back to New Zealand thinking, thank God I don't have to do Kendo anymore. Phew, you know, it was every day, it was hell. But as I said before, you know, I learned so much about how profound it actually is beyond the surface level. But I was still relieved when I got back to New Zealand. I didn't have to go and get my backside beaten up every day. But after a while, I started going through cold turkey, and it's like I started getting the jitters. And every time I saw an umbrella, I'd pick it up and start swinging it. And I thought, geez, I want to get back into Kendo. Actually, I need to get back into Kendo. And so I come from a city called Christchurch in New Zealand, and you know, I was still only 18. I'd passed the shodan examination after 1 year in Japan, and took that back as a kind of a souvenir I thought of at the time. And I wanted to continue, but there were no Kendo clubs. And so I went to a local martial arts shop, and I said, you know, is there any Kendo that I can get into here? And the guy said, no, but we get people coming into the shop wanting to know about Kendo. So why don't I give you their phone numbers, ring them up, and why don't you get a club going? Of course, he had commercial interests.
Yeah.
If a club got going, he'd sell equipment. And so I did. I rang up 2 people, and they said, yeah, let's do it. So we got together and we started a club, which is still going in Christchurch now. And once word got out in Christchurch that there was a Kendo club had been created, and there was just 3 of us at the time. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was teaching it. You know, I had no idea how to teach Kendo, but okay, do this.
1,000 times.
Yeah. Whack. And people from other martial arts, like karate clubs, or already well-established clubs like karate and judo and various, they wanted to come and check it out. And so they came and watched us, and some of them joined. All of these people were much older than I was, you know, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, much more experienced in Budo than I was, a lot more learned in the philosophy. And they'd come in and they'd ask me all these questions. It's like, well,
What do I know?
Yeah, I have no idea. But what the hell are you talking about? Bushido? What the hell's that? And all these, questions, and it's started getting a little bit inconvenient for me because I do this. I say teaching Kendo. I wasn't really teaching it, but it got to the point where, what am I going to do with this Kendo thing? And I could stay in New Zealand, go to university, and get a job working for some company, or I was thinking about joining the armed forces, going into the Air Force, or what the hell am I going to do? So I was 18. I was thinking about this experience. What was it all for? And getting asked all these questions at Budo, and it's like, God, I had no idea. I'm sure Sano Sensei used to talk a lot about this stuff, but I just didn't understand it. And so I picked up this book, and the book was the English translation of the novel Miyamoto Musashi. And the story is about Miyamoto Musashi in his young, wild days when he walked throughout, Japan, getting involved in all these life or death battles and thinking about the spiritual, philosophical side of swordsmanship and what it is, what's this life or death thing all about anyway. And it's sort of the story is, a very captivating story of a young man doing what is referred to as shugyo. So that's your spiritual, ascetic training in swordsmanship. And I read this book and I was this is this Bushido thing that people are talking about. This is the spiritual side or the philosophical side of Budo that people are talking about. And reading it, it starts off with Musashi as a 17-year-old. And I was only 17, 18 at the time. I was like, hey, this is cool. Actually, I should do the same thing. I should go back to Japan and do shugyo just for Kendo this time. And so I did. I came back to Japan a second time on a working holiday visa when I was, how long was I? I was 19, I think, because I'd saved up my money working on a building site. Came back to Japan and just did Kendo. And then my visa was about to run out. And it's like, God, I can't get a working holiday extended, but I need to stay in Japan longer because I'm learning so much. And I just got this offer from the All Japan Naginata Federation. Naginata is another different kind of martial art that's mainly practiced by women. And they were about to create the International Naginata Federation, and they needed somebody who would work for next to nothing in the Naginata Federation office, somebody who could speak English and Japanese and help with the preparation for the creation of the International Naginata Federation, liaise with the people from other countries and so on. And they didn't pay much, but they would sponsor my visa. They'd give me a place to live in a dojo where I could practice Kendo every day with 8th Dan, even 9th Dan senseis. They used to have, they don't have any anymore. And practice Iaido and practice Naginata and all of these other martial arts. It's like a dream come true, right? And so it's like, wow. So I went and worked for the Naginata Federation for 1 year. That's in Itami city in Hyogo, not far from here. And while I was doing the work for them, a lot of it involved translation, the history of Naginata and, like the education thing that we were just talking about before. And it's like, well, I don't know any of this history. So as I was, muddling my way through translating all this stuff, I sort of started to get really interested, started thinking about Musashi a little bit more and the history and the philosophy, the culture of Budo. And I sort of became quite fascinated with that. And it occurred to me that, well, if I'm doing Kendo and these other martial arts by this stage, then maybe I should know a lot more about, where it all came from. And so a natural extension of that was, I decided when my visa again was about to expire, I decided to go back to New Zealand, go to university and study East Asian history and Japanese history. And then that led to getting the mixed scholarship to come back to Japan, where I went to Kyoto University and started studying samurai culture or Japanese history at a much higher level. And just as a natural progression, because I found it interesting and I didn't have any other particular sort of ambitions to go out and work in the corporate world or whatever. It just sort of naturally fell into the academic side of things, and I guess I found my calling just in the research and writing about Budo. I guess I'm in a unique position because I'm actually here doing it, and I have a lot of Budo friends around the world who seem to think that I'm living the dream. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's a nightmare. But here I am for 35 years. I'm in the mixing in with these Japanese senseis and masters. At the same time, I'm also taking a very Western approach to my research, and can contextualize the deeper meaning of Budo, which I find that is I don't want to sound too arrogant when I say this, but I think is kind of missing, even though Budo is incredibly popular around the world and there are a lot of extremely high-level practitioners and senseis and masters, they don't have the connections that I've got. And so, but the kind of work that I do and the writing I do is I try to, I hope it's useful for people, because it's interesting for me, and I hope it's useful for people, not of all different levels, right from total novices, people who have a passing interest in Japanese history, right up to people who are really interested in the deepest, most esoteric aspects of the Budo philosophy. So I'm trying to sort of cover all of those bases with the work that I do. It's usually fairly lonely, but every now and again when I go overseas, somebody will come up and say, "Oh, I read that book of yours, and it's like really good, and thank you very much." And it's like, oh, okay, so it does make a difference. So that's why I sort of got into it. It started off with the club that I created in Christchurch, and that was the seed, and it's sort of like grown.
What's interesting too is you mentioned that you read that book from Musashi Miyamoto, and you were, I want to do this kind of shugyo and this practice.
Yeah.
And just before we started recording, you told me that you actually just finished translating after 6 years of work.
Yeah.
A book from it.
That's kind of crazy too. So just to rehash that a little bit, the book Musashi was masterfully translated in 1982. I think it was put out by Kodansha, which is a now defunct, Kodansha International, a now defunct major publishing house in Japan. And it's a brilliant translation, totally brilliant. And I've been doing a lot of books over the years for another major company dealing with Japanese topics called Tuttle. And the president of Tuttle has become quite a good friend over the years. And he said, look, would you be interested in translating Yoshikawa Eiji's Musashi? And I said, well, there's already a really good translation. It's like brilliant. And he goes, yeah, but it's not ours. We want one for Tuttle. It's like, oh, okay. All right, I'll give it a go, I said, without thinking too much into it until I started it. And it's like, yeah, it took 6 years. It was really hard work. And it's going to be published in June. So what is the point of having another translation? What's the difference? Well, I really love the original translation, and I know that people are going to compare them, and some are going to like mine, and some are going to like the other one. But what I tried to do with my translation, first of all, the big difference is it's complete. The original one is about 25-30% missing. It doesn't change the story at all, but it's because it's not necessary. It was cut, probably because it's such a massive book. In Japanese, it's 8 different books, all
Oh wow!
put into one,
8
right?
books combined into one big.
Yeah,
How many
yeah.
pages is this?
Well,
gonna be?
my one is because it's a complete translation. It is close to 1,800 pages. So
That's a lot.
It's going to be 3 big books, right? So the first difference is it's complete. The second one is big difference, I think, is with the original translation, the characters, the way they speak, is there's not much not much difference between the way they speak. But if you the original Japanese, it's full of different. What can you say? Dialects.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the status or the class of the character involved, so different dialects and different regions speaking a different way, and I sort of wanted to really accentuate that side of it in my translation. So I've put a lot of effort into focusing on the way that each one of the characters speaks and interacts with each other, which I think is closer to the original Japanese. So there's a lot of being a New Zealander, of course, I'm more focused on British English, even though I have to use American spelling, unfortunately. Anyway, British English, so I've got a lot of, kind of a Cockney accent for some of the characters and a Peaky Blinders accent for some of them and a very Kiwi accent for some of them. So it's sort of, that gives the characters a little bit more life, I think, a little bit more, closer to what Yoshikawa Eiji was doing.
I feel like we could go for hours into the nitty-gritty of translating a historical novel like this. Maybe I just want to ask about Miyamoto Musashi. He's such a historical figure who's been portrayed in so many ways online. You can find hundreds of videos about this is how you should live your life. The way of... If you had to simplify a little bit, what should people know about this figure and what should they kind of ignore from all this?
Oh, wow. Where do we start with that? The thing is with Musashi, and with Tuttle again, I published a translation of Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, and other works that Musashi had penned in the 1640s, which had never been translated before. And I've done a lot of research into Musashi as a person. And the thing is, even throughout history in Japan, there's so much fiction surrounding his life. The legend has been just, cultivated to the extent that it surely is very different to what the true Musashi was. However, with the research, looking at various other sort of materials, looking at the era that he lived in and contextualizing his movements on the basis of the kind of society he was living in. He was, if you want to talk about master, I think he was absolutely a master of swordsmanship. His book, Gorin no Sho, which everybody talks about as some wonderful philosophy. Well, it was a basic textbook for his students. Like, don't do this, do this. And if you want to get good, you just got to train hard and think about it, for crying out loud. He was very matter of fact. He was very black and white, actually. I think people read too much into it a lot of the time and they miss the point. Gorin no Sho, his book, is often treated as a work of literature. It wasn't literature. It was a basic textbook, a how-to keep his students on the straight and narrow. He was very pragmatic. And I think that gets lost, probably because a lot of it has to do with like, for example, the novel that I translated, Yoshikawa Eiji's book, has had a massive influence on the way that Musashi is perceived outside Japan and in Japan. But Yoshikawa Eiji was greatly influenced by documents that were created in the 1700s and the 1800s. And most people think, well, they're old, so they must be correct. But no, these were also perpetuating a myth about Musashi. So even the old documents that we read about Musashi in Japanese are often very contradictory. They blow him up to be something that he probably was. wasn't. In some cases, extraordinary, superhuman individual. In other cases, a real bad bastard. And so it depends on what side of the fence you're sitting. But from my feeling and the work that I've done and what I've tried to actually portray Musashi's character as in the novel, even, I think he was very introverted. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this. You might want to cut it out later on if it seems a bit strange. But I think he might have even been on the spectrum, to be honest. I think he was a genius. I think in his day he was extremely misunderstood. I think he was also very violent, but also incredibly sensitive at the same time. And so if we try and judge it on modern sensibilities, of course, he's a total weirdo. But in his day, the way in which he trained his body and he trained his mind, he was relentless. And the advice that he gives, as long as you don't read too much into it, put your own interpretation on it. It's actually very straightforward. And his basic message is like I said, it's like, don't take anything for granted. Don't sit back on your laurels, and always try and perceive the person or the things around you, perhaps not at face value. Look behind, see what is at the heart of an issue. So in that sense, his advice is kind of universal and still very relevant. And I'm kind of guilty of it in a way because I'm publishing books about him, and you get royalties and so on, and having the Musashi boom, is an industry unto itself. Is like, it's a lot of people are taking advantage of that, and they have done throughout history, only in recent years outside of Japan as well. But I think his, put it this way, if he was alive today, he'd be an interesting guy to talk to. I don't know if we'd get on particularly. But
I think that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think for the many people interested, they will have your translation available in the next few months, probably around the same time as we release this episode, and they can kind of dive into the life of Musashi, learn more, and maybe take some of the things that are written about this person and shown on YouTube with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that people are talking about it, using it, just shows how, what an incredible life. Is that fate? I don't know. But if you want to know more about what we do know and what we don't know about Musashi, I'd recommend checking out the Book of Five Rings that I translated, because I put quite a long introduction in there about his life. And so I would check that out. But I don't know if that would spoil the fun in the novel.
Well, maybe read the novel first and then
I'd go with that.
We'll make sure to put the links to everything in the description so they can find it.
Yep.
Alex, thank you so much for your many insights into Kendo, into this very unique philosophy, way of life, more than just a martial art in a way, and for talking a little bit about your research as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back again next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, here are a couple more that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.